Starline Windows has been manufacturing aluminum and vinyl windows and doors for over 50 years and is the largest window wall manufacturer in Western North America. Our products meet and exceed industry standards for building envelope integrity, while our quality control and testing procedures ensure that your project receives the best possible product. Employing the most advanced technology available today in our new 500,000 square foot facility, Starline Windows can manufacture nearly 5 million square feet of window wall per year and over 1,500 vinyl windows per day. The implementation of customized software, along with top-of-the-line advanced automation throughout the factory, helps control the entire manufacturing process, from the generation of shop drawings to delivery and installation. Starline Windows powder coats all of its aluminum profiles in-house, using the highest quality, environmentally responsible powder coatings available in the world. Our state-of-the-art vertical powder coat line is like no other in North America and has dramatically increased our paint capacity, allowing us to inventory pre-finished product in an array of colors. This guarantees the continuous availability of material for your project, along with confidence in our ability to deliver as well. Please call us or visit our website to learn more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our roadshow today, The Digital Thread, A Customer Journey. First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and taking the time out of your busy day and joining us. During this event, everyone will be on mute. However, there'll be time in between segments for some questions and answers. This event is also being recorded and will be made available for viewing and sharing with your colleagues within the next week. This event will be highlighting the journey of Starline Windows as they navigate challenges and solutions of growing and adapting in their industry. We're going to hear directly from the client on how they're able to identify their pain points and implement solutions to streamline their business's communications, organization, and workflow. We're also going to learn insights on how to apply these tools to your own organization from our team of industrial professionals and the Queen of Prefab herself, Amy Marks. We have two really special guest speakers today. First, we have Catherine. She is a solution analyst with a passion for her work with the continuous improvement department. During her 10 years at Starline Windows, Catherine has focused on software implementations, custom software design, lean manufacturing, process engineering, and strategic planning initiatives. Catherine's work at Starline spans everything from building design and information management to product installation and change management. Then we have Amy Marks, VP Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism at Autodesk. She is known throughout the world as the Queen of Prefab. At Autodesk, she informs product strategy, thought leadership, and convergence consulting for customers incorporating industrialized construction methodologies. Prior to joining Autodesk, she defined the language, process, and frameworks that are adopted by companies, universities, and countries around the world, reflecting the convergence of design, make, operate models. Also, our speakers today from Solidcad are myself. With over 18 years of professional experience, I've gained extensive knowledge as well as developed an appreciation and understanding for providing a consistently high level of excellent customer account management. For the past 2 years, I've been recognized as one of the most resourceful PLM business development reps and customer management success rep here at Solidcad. Next up, we have Shaya. As a mechanical engineer and certified PENG in Ontario, Shaya brings years of expertise from the automotive industry, oil and gas sector, and mechanical equipment design. As a key member of Solidcad's manufacturing team, Shaya provides project management, pre- and post-sales consulting services for enterprise projects. In addition to his industry experience, he has considerable portfolio of software expertise. He is also co-publisher of experimental characterization of a robotic drug delivery system based on magnetic propulsion, which was published in IEE and ASME. Next up, we have Andrew. Andrew is our sales manager at Solidcad for the architectural, engineering, and construction divisions. During his 17 years in the construction industry, he has worked with firms of all sizes, including many of the largest contractors in North America, to successfully identify, implement, and optimize the right technology to meet their goals. Next, we have Tom. Tom handles the business side of the relationship for Solidcad's PLM customers. So on our agenda today, we're going to start off with Amy Marks, where she's going to talk about her vision of the future in industrialized construction and industry changes. Then we're going to hear from Catherine and her story of Starline Windows, where she was going to talk about Starline's background, focus areas of the business, challenges they have had, and what drove them to change. After Catherine, we will then have a roundtable talk with Amy and Catherine, where they're going to discuss challenges and solutions in reference to RFQ and tender, process engineering, business system integration. Then we're going to have a little time for some questions and answers throughout these discussions. And in the end, Catherine will be speaking to her vision of the future for Starline and the industry. With that said, let me help me welcome Amy Marks, VP Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism at Autodesk. She is known throughout the world as the Queen of Prefab. She is our keynote speaker today, and she will be sharing her vision of the future of industrialized construction. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm Amy Marks, and I'm the head of Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism at Autodesk, also known as the Queen of Prefab. I'm going around the world to some of the coolest factories, and I'm meeting with owners, designers, builders, and manufacturers to get a behind-the-scenes look at what goes into fabricating the future. Join me, the Queen of Prefab.
You know it's going to be good when they come with their own commercial, I think. So actually, it's not a commercial. We have on the YouTube site over at Autodesk some episodes of the Queen of Prefab series, a fourth one coming out. If you have some great factories around the world, including the one at Starline Windows, we'd love to come and see you because we do highlight some cool companies around the world. And we've had over 3 million views in the last 90 days, actually, on this series. So lots of interest around this topic. I want to talk about what's going on in the world, though, some of the things that cause us pain, some of the solutions that are out there. And we're going to use Catherine as some great examples of what's been able to be worked through for some of these great workflows for success. But really for us, you know, when we're thinking about the world of design, make, and operate, uncertainty is really our enemy, right? So architects literally design today based on assumptions, and they often pull static libraries from their desktops that don't always represent what can actually be made and also meet their requirements. Lots of my architects in the world say they design things they hope can be made, and they have to somehow connect with these manufacturers like Starline to make sure what they're putting in the drawings is exactly within the manufacturability of the people that can make things. And so if they don't really do that right now by hand in some ways, or through one of these more advanced workflows, it starts to cascade very inefficient, broken processes. And I think really some of the source of that pain is that really and the true opportunity that some of the things will be highlighted today is that the tools are disconnected sometimes. And if you leave them sometimes disconnected, it might prevent people from sharing the information and the real solutions that they really need at the front of the process at manufacturing informed design. So let's talk about a little bit about how it's actually addressed today. And this slide's a little bit of a build. So Shaya, you're running my slides today. Well, hopefully that you get this, you know, kind of as we're talking. So for all you guys out there, try to follow along. This isn't a pretty picture. I'm just going to warn you that although there's many personas that you know, disconnection can affect, I'm going to use this very simple example of a multi-trade assembly. In this case, let's talk about a bathroom battery assembly. It's actually a manufactured assembly. It's the guts behind the stalled bathrooms you might see in something like I usually say football stadium, let's say hockey, since we have a lot of Canadians on here. I always say it's not the sexiest manufactured element to a designer, but everybody in all those hockey stadiums actually needs to use the bathroom after drinking some beer. So we still need to have them. So what happens today is that designer typically uses a placeholder that comes from some sort of static data, whether it's Revit, AutoCAD, just something on their desktop, a copy and paste from their last project, some static information to inform what that manufactured assembly needs to be for space allocation. at a minimum for space allocation and sometimes other requirements. The focus is on the overall building design, usually from these architects, not necessarily on the piece part. They pass those assumptions to the general contractor. They do the same thing with varying degrees of information, more assumptions. Months later, they pass it down to this, in this case, the MEP maker. And that maker actually says like, well, I don't have enough space and I can't quite make this. Let me send it to my manufacturing, my fabrication shop. And those ladies and gentlemen, they do the best they can. And what ends up happening is they sometimes have to make a one-off bespoke, we call it a snowflake, downstream fabrication, or they're manufacturing something that isn't quite in their standards, right? And then they pass that information back to the general contractor to try to align that with their costs and schedule. And they pass that back to the architect, and it doesn't often compute in the original intention. And so that's called a coordination meeting. If you look at the building product manufacturers, more like a Starline or any other building product manufacturer that's more of an evolved manufacturer, this gets even more complicated to distributors and down through multiple subcontractor layers, and then finally to them. And so you don't have to guess, it's like the worst telephone game ever. Like when you're a little kid, except the information at the front was never right to begin with. And it just creates more expensive consequences. And that's something we have to make sure. This is about thousands of interdependent assemblies going on at the same exact time, which makes it even worse if it's disconnected. So if you haven't watched AU this year, you can go back and look at some of the things. This is from Keynote Day 2. And you heard Andrew Anagnost, our CEO, talking about that uncertainty and how to solve for that. And how do we bring manufacturing information to the front of the design process? So everybody always says design, make, design, make, design, make, operate. And I say, no, it's actually operate, make, design. You have to flip the script. We have to think about the owner requirements. We have to understand what can be made within the manufacturing constraints and enable those manufactured elements to inform the design. I always say there's a difference between prefab and productization. If we go to the next slide, some of the inventor to Revit connection talk, we're going to talk about solves for some of this. But in reality, it's got to be more than just product. We've got to enable manufactured informed design in some of the connected workflows. We have to understand to be an advocate for business change at Autodesk and within our partner network, like Solidcad, and evangelize about those things. Listen to customers. Advocate does not mean just thought leadership. It's a two-way street. We have to have empathy for our customers and understanding our partners. And also, we have something called convergence consulting now here at Autodesk that works with groups like Solidcad to make sure when we're working together with our customers like Starline, that they're understanding that, again, it's a manufacturing informed design process, make and design, not necessarily the other way around. We have to connect this so customers can focus on their core talents. By the way, I don't know any architect that wanted to be a database manager in life. And if you are a craftsman these days, you don't have the luxury of not utilizing technology to actually get where you want to go. That's really where the value is going to lie here. So I won't go too far into this, but the industrialized construction is applying manufacturing techniques to the built environment. There's lots of technology and process enablers. I want to draw your attention over to data for manufacturing and assembly. Lots of times people say design for manufacturing and assembly. That's not right. It's actually the data that you need to inform that design. And there's lots of things on that downstream prefabrication right now that we want to move towards products like windows. We want every piece part in the building to be components that make up the largest part. By the way, my makers of building products are actually making larger and larger assemblies. We want to use that data so you can do very custom things like you saw in the automation in their factory, things to apply to the making of things like additive manufacturing and robotics and automation that you're going to see in Catherine's factory. That data is so important to connect up front. So we'll just build this real quick all the way out, Shaya. The transformation framework, you have to think about this, and how we run our conversions consulting is through this framework that I've developed, which is basically about understanding where you want to go to in life, how to change things. It starts with foundational skills. Nobody buys a 6-axis arm robot unless they have, if they're at level 1 manufacturing. You know what I mean? You have to make sure you're ready for this with your tech, with your tools, with your culture. And then you have to productize things, both the physical piece part and the workflows, so it can be digitized, connected, and optimized, and ultimately so we can reuse data. Digital waste exponentially leads to physical waste. Thanks, Shaya. And so these workflows for manufacturing informed design might be some different tools that you're not used to working in if you're not just directly from the manufacturing side, but if you're converging from construction to manufacturing. So Revit is a fantastic tool, but you notice I'm not starting with Revit. Revit is the consumer of that data. The manufacturing technology has to actually get things down to the fastener level detail, understand the rules and parameters and constraints that architect can then adjust, staying within the manufacturability of that window or that window system or that window or any product that's out there. And so we have to do that. And what's really connecting these together is Forge. Our platform at Autodesk is built on Forge and connected on Forge. Lots of the things you're going to be hearing about today with Starline and with Solidcad have been built on that environment. One more click. That's our Forge ecosystem. It connects, it's like digital glue to these portfolio products for people like Catherine and Solidcad to make sure that they're able to connect everything together, that data flow, in order to create better outcomes for everybody. So I think we'll go one more click on this, Shaya. I'm trying to stay within my time. I'm a little over, but let's go to the story of Starline.
Thank you so much, Amy. Now I'd like to welcome Catherine Walmsley. Catherine's work at Starline spans everything from building design and information management to product installation and change management. Catherine is a business analyst from Starline Windows, and as she takes us through the background and challenges they face in an ever-changing industry and what drove them to change their process and adopt a PLM strategy. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, thank you, Tanya. Really thrilled to be here. So I have been working with Starline for just over a decade now, and I'm really happy to have a chance to share our story with you. This has been a company run by some of the hardest working people around. I know I'm not the only one, and chances are many of you listening today can relate to this, since you've gone the extra mile to come and join us today. So I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Starline is a manufacturer and installer of windows and doors. It's designed for all kinds of projects. We have a complete line of high-performance glazing products. In our 50 years of operations, we've completed glazing contracts for thousands of projects throughout North America. We've proudly worked on several award-winning buildings from Los Angeles, California, to our hometown of Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. In the time I've been with Starline, I've seen a huge range of projects too. Everything from single dwelling family homes to massive 40 and 50-story high-rise towers. Starline has played a key role in shaping the iconic downtown skylines of our major metropolis cities along the west coast of North America, including Vancouver and Burnaby in BC. With the needs of our clients changing both over the years and from project to project, the ability to react to the changing demands of the construction industry has been a key to our survival. We always say, if you're not growing in this industry, you're dying. Scaling up hasn't been something that's a nicety. It's something that is a necessity to stay competitive in today's market. Since the early 1980s, Starline has gone from a company just shy of 50 employees to the city of Surrey's 5th largest employer. There are 500,000 people in this city. As our business has grown, so has the complexity in the architectural designs, the project management coordination, and the structural demand on our products. And so we empower our employees to tap into their full potential, to embrace with confidence the consistency of change. In the last 20 years alone, our industry has undergone not only revolutionary new tools and technologies, but new perspectives on the values of architectural designs. Our engineers really enjoy and thrive on the constant challenge for new cutting-edge aesthetics, performance, and improved energy efficiency. It's a common misconception that the technology to build these fantastic buildings was created first, which then allowed the buildings that mankind could never have dreamed of before to be designed. Well, that's not true. Our architects are dreamers. The truth is that there are incredible human beings out there, like each one of you listening today. You are the pioneers who paved the way. You find new ways to do the impossible. When you are asked to repeat the impossible, that's when someone like myself and our software engineers get involved to help automate the processes. In order to provide a healthy, change positive work environment, you always need to be in the driver's seat. We don't really need to look any further than our record-breaking project for 3 Civic Plaza to find mind-boggling complexity. Starline is really an incredible company. It's built on ingenuity, and integrity. And every one of us was put to the test when we agreed to take on this project. The building contains a custom window shape we never could have seen coming. We called this feature element guitar pick shaped windows. This project holds a record for the tallest building ever constructed in the city of Surrey. The challenge of taking on these iconic projects is what led Starline to really assess how software can help us streamline our processes, improve our data management, and offer clients the qualities and savings they demand to keep us competitive in today's market. We all know complexity is the enemy of quality. Things took a very personal turn for us when we started seeing the vast majority of our highly qualified and experienced workforce age. These were the people who could assemble our products into the various complicated configurations that allowed us to do what we do. Amy nailed it in her presentation when she mentioned there are many snowflakes out there, which is a pre-stock material. By using pre-stock materials that are adaptable, you can stay agile and on demand for clients' orders. In the early 2000s, we really had to look at the physical challenges of our products. The assembly staff were facing. Structural engineering has allowed us to manufacture and pass building code reviews for materials that have become larger and heavier. And bringing in new muscle power is a constant onboarding and training challenge. We didn't want to see employees burn out. And at the same time, safety concerns for a workforce doing heavy lifting was a serious consideration for how to proceed. This was the real driving force for seeking out the next generation in machinery and technology to bridge the gap from design modeling to manufacturing.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Now it's time for a short break and introducing our first very own Variant commercial. Enjoy.
Current sales and quotation processes are slow, inefficient, and often lead to missed opportunities. Introducing Variant by Solidcad, a cloud-based subscription product for your sales staff and customers. Variant brings the rules-based configuration of Inventor assets to the cloud and provides a platform for integration with other business systems. With an intuitive interface, you can make selections according to your requirements to build and interact with your configuration without the need for plugins or additional software. Generate pricing based on your selections, including a downloadable quote, which is built dynamically and incorporates a table of line items and visuals of the configured model. Are you ready to optimize your manufacturing business? Take the next step and visit solidcad.ca/variant to book your demo.
If you have any questions about Variant, please feel free to reach out to us. Now we begin our discussion between Amy and Catherine, where they're going to discuss RFQ and tender, relating material costs to actual costs over time. Amy and Catherine, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank
you so much. I watched that commercial and I see Variant, and it warms my heart a little bit after you saw my iterative cycle, right, Catherine? I mean, talk about what are the actual costs over time, what we think the costs are, or what somebody has deemed what the cost should be. What is that? How does that strike you when you saw that iterative loop and then you see a solution like Variant?
Yeah, well, I think that it's something that a lot of people do make a lot of assumptions about. And when it comes to cost, immediately most people are thinking, oh, it's time and materials, right? Maybe a little bit of overhead. I mean, how much more is there? Well, those of us who really delved into a project lifecycle, we know that's a gross oversimplification. How do you determine how much time it took to build a product when you're building 500 other products all at the same time for different clients? When I paint a batch of 1,000 pieces of material, later use 100 of those on a project, obviously 1/10 of the time it took to paint that batch should be accounted towards the cost of labor for that project. Now what happens when I've been quoting on 1/10 of that cost to paint 1,000 materials, but I sell 10 batches of 100 and one of their customers wants their batch painted a custom color? Now the cost of that batch of 100 is not quite the same as the amount of labor to paint 1,000, but it's still significant. So things start to get complicated, they get a little convoluted. Of course, we want our customers to be able to choose whatever color makes them happy. At the same time, we want to keep our costs down so we can offer competitive prices. So how do you approach it? You know, the average cost for our custom standard colors, do we charge a flat rate? Do we charge differently? It's never an easy decision, right? Business owners need to constantly review this cost under a microscope in order to make sure they're on the right path.
So I have a question for you. I mean, you mentioned some of these things. I think the problem with the original cost that was intended versus the end cost, how much of that is around some misinformation that might have informed the design up front without having the right maker information to inform what that designer was doing? You said it, they're dreamers, and they should be dreamers. They're not supposed to be database managers. So how does that difference happen, and where do we see some of those gaps?
Yeah, and I think it is something that it's really worded right into the original quote and the contracts that are being signed. There's always a little bit of ambiguity in there. Things like to be confirmed by architect or by other trades, things like pending engineering review. These are some really common phrases that we use in this type of contracts, and even in, you know, early architectural drawings that are issued for tender.
That's Catherine. That's why they have submittals. That's what the whole submittal process is about, right? So yep. I was just talking to my friend yesterday, who's a big general contractor. He said when he joined this space, he was like, well, they said it has to be this. Why do I have to show them a submittal later that I picked the thing they wanted it to be? And that's because there's so much ambiguity, right? So I don't want to break up your thought process, but that's what that whole process is about, that ambiguity.
Yeah. Now, the ambiguity when you're discussing that contract in the beginning of the quote process, it's usually based on some what we call known variability. So if we think the electrical contract is going to be awarded to company A or B, we know there can be some cost differences in accommodating their fittings into our product to make sure that's sealing properly. So we will make sure that we have that ambiguity worded into the contract based on how we expect that to be awarded. Now, what happens when company C comes out of the blue and blows them out of the water with a fantastic proposal, a completely different product we weren't expecting, right? So all of a sudden we are, as you said, accommodating something that we never could have planned for. Right? It's
but you should have known, Catherine, you should have known. You should have known, right? That's the common language in our space.
We certainly do try to have those known variabilities as much as possible. You know, and it is an industry, it's built on relationships. So when we know that, you know, this developer commonly works with the electrical company A and B, we can feel pretty confident quoting them a price based on that information. But we do want to be able to change. We do want to be able to look at, you know, the company C and say, hey, there's a great product here. This isn't something we want to turn away. You know,
and I think that's
an example.
Hey, Catherine, let me ask you a question. You just said something very interesting, like, and to the point that our manufacturers are getting larger and larger assemblies. You don't want to stop that innovation, right? You see that happening. You want to take that in, and that's one of those gaps, right? That you couldn't have possibly known up front. That might be an improvement later. So how does keep telling me about that when that guy comes or that lady comes along with something better?
Yeah. So now we're looking at two different streams. We're looking at our historical analysis, which is going to track, well, when we quoted the last project and it was awarded to company A, how far out was it? Then we know when we're quoting the next contract, how we want to adjust that quote. But there's also a lot of predictive analytics involved. So things like, we do know what the building code approvals are allowing for. We do talk to the architects and we ask them, what is their goal? What is their value? It's about design intention. It's not necessarily about design specifics at the quote process. So we make sure that we are really understanding what is it they care about so that we can make that connection and deliver what matters.
And for you, where do you think some of these improvements in the future are going to come from? You are talking about, when you say, every time I hear someone in the space say, when we talk to them about design intent, it's like, we just said everyone's aging out. How many of those superhumans can actually go and have that conversation and articulate the questions, absorb the answers, and process that right now? So aside from technology enabling that, you know, that process to capture it, tell me about some of the other improvements you think that can be made to this?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is a matter of, experience is hard to get, easy, quick to lose, hard to gain, right? So it's a difficult thing for companies who, as Starline, is working with a large group of people. So tracking things that, they don't specifically need our intervention at this point it's not about us causing extra paperwork for our guys in the field. It's a matter that we need to be able to see in a data trend what looks normal, so that when we're using AI and analysis to help determine what's popping out, those things that are not quite normal and need a little extra experience to review stick out like a sore thumb.
So it's unwanted variability becomes very known when you're able to apply AI. So if you don't have the person that knows for 50 years experience or 30 years experience, the technology does that hard work for you. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's about being able to find the exceptions, point it out really quickly, and bring that to the attention of the people who are making decisions.
I think for me, one of the future states of improvement is you're doing a lot of that downstream, right? So we did a lot of that with the intent of the documentation. I'd love, as we were talking, as you're collecting this data currently somewhat downstream, for you to collect enough data and move that data upstream so that you can actually, instead of it being design intent, you can actually allow them to take your known variabilities, create something new that's still manufacturable, that still doesn't have to stick out like a sore thumb. What would your life be like if designers were able to take your current product lines, customize them, and then give them to you as something that could be made?
That is the dream. It's really about a lot of communication at this point with our architects to make sure that we're building those tools in the way that they're looking for. It's about having these conversations that we're having today so we can figure out what is the standardized way to build those tools, so that when an architect pulls those tools out of our website, it's something that they can plug into their project without too much question. If we've modeled our product left to right and the architect's trying to draw their walls right to left, it's just not going to work. So these are some conversations that we're really excited to be having right now. And it's something that we've been discussing with a lot of architects, and we're really looking forward to reaching that level of collaboration.
I think that's so important. I think we have to get away from the notion that collaboration is just using our mouths, right? Absolutely. Getting people to the front of the process is not collaboration, right? We've got to use the technology and tools like AI, like you're using, to inform people and allow them to do the things they're very good at and that they want to do, instead of, the things that they don't actually have the information for. Most of my architects want this future too, by the way. They wish they were pointing and clicking at something that was dynamic and real instead of something static on their desktop like we showed. Right. And as you're gathering this data, it's going to be the pillars for the baseline of the future informed design. And I think that that's so important. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Yeah, and I really love that you mentioned collaboration needs to be more than just speaking. It is something that, as we're trying to get ahead of this problem, a lot of the companies, manufacturing companies like myself, are bringing their product engineers into that sales contract negotiation conversation very, very early on, which is a really important approach. It's a really important step. But as you mentioned, we want to be able to have tools that educate the client, which in this case is the architect or the developer, on how our product needs to be engineered. So it's self-evident.
Yes, it should be, by the way. It's almost like, a friend of mine tells a story that, we think about manufacturing like IKEA in this country, in North America. And we say, like, listen, we want it to be plug and play. And my friend tells the story that he ordered a dresser on Tuesday to put together with his daughter on Saturday. By Thursday, it got delivered and his 12-year-old daughter put it together. And he's like, that's how everything should be, plug and play. And we focus on that last part. What we don't focus on is all the highly engineered information and data that went into the first part of creating that information, that documentation, the way in which those products were developed in order for that 12-year-old to put it together, the non-expert, using the tools that they feel comfortable with. And a lot of people want to go right to the end, and they have to go to that foundation of the hard work you're doing now, because it's not easy, and it really is a big payoff for you. And I applaud you guys, because nobody works harder when you're trying to capture that data and apply technology to it.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. Now I'd like to introduce to you Tom, our PLM sales manager. Tom, can you explain to us where Starline's digital thread begins?
Yep, absolutely. So the digital thread for Starline really starts just as soon as that customer request comes in. So Starline is now able to digitally record customer and project information and not keep it tucked away in a cabinet or even in somebody's inbox. And all that relevant information is included, like customer details, delivery information, project details and sales details, even purchase order information. And since several people in different departments are involved in sales and estimation, those workflows in PLM guide those teams to the next stage in the process, really removing all those unnecessary delays. And as the request travels through the stages, all team members have this centralized location to view, add, or update the information as it changes. So as the digital thread continues through Starline's now standardized processes, departments such as engineering really help to shape the product development by collaborating in the same centralized platform in PLM. So as shown in the workflow diagrams on the screen, all the stakeholders are involved in the process and able to add information. This information is completely traceable, and Starline is now able to report on the data that is important to them at the time they need it. And that traceability and the reporting allows Starline to continuously improve their processes as time goes on. So all the information that has been captured by the different teams in various stages of sales, estimating, product engineering, makes its way into a complete bill of materials. Information is available in different forms, so teams like purchasing or engineering can view their BOM in the way that makes the most sense to them. And as you can see, a complete list of components with their descriptions, relevant attachments, quantity values, physical properties such as length and width, the vendor information, and critically, cost are all presented in Starline's bill of materials. And since the very beginning of the sales process, all the data and changes to that data has been tracked in PLM. Because of this, Starline can go back in time to review and report on what happened, and more importantly, why. Additionally, since the data is tracked in PLM, Starline can compare the initial quoted cost with the actual cost via a very simple bill of materials comparison. As you can see, the red lines show the old data, the blue is the current, most up-to-date information. This provides the all-important ability to relate initial material cost estimates to actual costs over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So now we have some time for some question and answers. Malika, are you able to see if there's any questions in the chat right now?
I don't have any questions yet, but if anyone does have any questions on this topic, just put them in the chat and I'll read through them for you so that you can get some answers.
Perfect. We'll give it about 4 minutes.
We do have one question here. Whoever wants to answer this, it says, do you use ERP in conjunction with PLM?
We do use ERP in conjunction with PLM. What we find is that PLM is really a central repository that allows us to look into what is the state of the work that's happening, where our ERP is really about manufacturing lead times and applying different dates and all of our very complicated calculations that run into managing the materials and the resources that are needed to accomplish everything that we need to do. So we splice it all out into tiny little bite-sized pieces. And when each of those pieces are done, we report it into PLM, so we can always check back to see what's been happening in all the different pieces.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. We'll just give it a few more minutes.
And if anyone does think of any questions and forgets to mention them here, we will have another Q&A just at the very end, so don't panic.
Okay, perfect. So this is the part of our presentation where we start our second roundtable. I want to thank you for your questions and answers. Here, Amy and Catherine will be discussing process engineering and the most effective way to govern content creation. Amy, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think, listen, traditionally manufacturing has approached product design with an expectation that users are going to really trigger these states of change manually. And we've already discussed, especially now with work from home and a different changing workforce, that's just not the answer anymore. So what is the new state of change? Like, how are we dealing with this now in this future state, Catherine? Well, what's going to trigger changes, in these states now?
Yeah, well, now we have an opportunity we never had before. We have these amazing cloud applications backing our businesses, right? And as you mentioned, the Forge is an incredible tool for bringing all of this information together. So one thing that we've done that's very important is allowing people to work in a place that provides the best productivity for their workflow, right? We need to be able to enable them to use the tools that are right for them. I don't want to force everyone to use Revit or Inventor. They need to use the one that's right for the job they're trying to do. As that work is being completed, you're right, we used to rely on a human being to submit a report saying, oh, this work's been done, now you can move on to the next stage. But now with these cloud applications, as the work is being saved into the repository, it already has that completion status, it has an approval review associated with it. All of that information, it's easy to pass into our PLM, which is our state manager, which then triggers notifications and automation to start off on the next step in the process.
I mean, it's so crazy, right? You think about like when COVID hit, all of a sudden companies that actually said, well, you can never have your job work from home, or we can never go paperless. I have a friend, literally, he owns a big mechanical contracting firm. He had a couple processes he was trying to go paperless with for 3 years. And they said it couldn't be done, can't be done. We just can't figure it out. COVID hits, 3 days later, they're paperless. He was like, nothing has changed in 3 days in technology enabling this. And a lot of what we've just learned in COVID, by making us really understand the resources available to us on the cloud, have changed how we interact with the technology that already exists, right? That's very different than new tech. It's not just, you saw our 3 pillars, it's about the tech, it's about advocacy for business change. You have to understand that your business has to change, right? And we've got to connect these workflows and understand our new way of working, right? So now you have people from home, you've got this cloud advancement. Thankfully, we can have all stakeholders access data at the cloud level, right? And that's going to open up some really big opportunities for you, right? So let's talk about how does that work from home? In some ways, they're going to benefit by some of this, and it changes the way they work, right?
Yeah, it definitely changed a few things for us. We found that it was really helpful that we had already been embracing the attitude of being change positive. It's something, as I mentioned earlier, that Starline's really valued for a long time. So when COVID hit, we had all these amazing tools that we had started with. But what it did was gave this huge bloom of progress and activity that we saw. So there were the holdouts. There's always the holdouts for change management. And when COVID hit, it was an easy way to say, well, you know what? There are people who are able to go paperless. There are ways where we can communicate online. You know, it's made a big difference and it made a big impact on our business. That said, manufacturing product is a physical aptitude that's required. So as far as the manufacturing side of it goes, of course, it is an essential infrastructure job. So we have had to continue that in person. But the management of the process was something that we were able to pull back and provide that visibility, which has really played a key role for our decision makers in giving them the information that they were looking for, that typically they would have to come connect to our network, run a special local report that can only be generated in the office, right? Or have someone email it to them. Now we've been able to bring those tools forward and put that in the palm of their hands, in their smartphones, in the fields, in the conversations, and in the conversations that make a big difference when they're planning these projects.
I think it's been a really healthy thing in some ways for us for change management. And I think, you know, we have to, that resiliency that was required, we have to think about that moving forward, and resiliency for our businesses, regardless of, you know, having a pandemic, not having a pandemic. It's like change management. No one wants to change for the sake of change. But if you're not evolving, like you said up front, if you're not changing all the time, if you're not thinking, I always say to, you know, C-suite executives, if you're not thinking about how your company is going to be wiped off the face of the earth next week, you're probably not doing that portion of your job very well, to think about what needs to change in order for you to remain relevant and resilient, right? So I think, you know, some of that is about understanding how to keep information and systems consistent. So whether or not you're in the office able to download that, or at home, you know, how do you actually keep that information between models and spreadsheets and data and dashboards? How do you keep that consistent across all the systems for Starline?
That's a big question, right? So especially in allowing people to work in the platform that best suits their job activity, then it really does mean that you are operating on the same data in multiple platforms, which can be tricky to coordinate. So it's certainly about, as you mentioned, becoming that data manager, understanding how those data fields are passing back and forth. And in our case, it was a lot of using the Forge to be able to pull that data out and not have somebody read it off of a fab sheet and type it into the next platform to run the purchase order. I can't afford to have a human being make a typing mistake when they're entering that information. It's being carefully collected, discussed, reviewed, and approved in the first process. So when I pass it down to the next process, I can't give a minimum wage clerk the power to make a typo. So it's absolutely about making sure that data is a touch once for a human thing, and it's being passed from the original source to where it's needed for the planning and for the reporting.
I think that's so important. I mean, look, we have so many digital natives now coming up in the space. I always say, like, you know, a lot of people ask me all the time, is industrialized construction going to allow us to have less skilled labor in certain places where we don't have the skilled labor anymore? I've actually stopped saying those words. I don't like the words less skilled. I think we have differently skilled people that we need desperately in our AEC and manufacturing spaces. We have digital natives. We have people that are coming from other industries with different perspectives. When I saw Tom pull up that workflow, some of the interesting things is that you're able to use Forge to automate and use some digital glue products that some you've developed and some that are within the ecosystem, some with your partner, because you have a product and you've productized that workflow. You could see that workflow so that you could automate that workflow. Lots of people jump right to automation. Lots of people are like, how do I buy a robot? How do I automate this? And they forget that that's the last 5% of the journey. It's the 95% of the hard work you've done in doing workflow mapping, in understanding these processes and productizing them, right? Directing them, connecting them to the window or the door or whatever that assembly is, so that you could automate this, have less people touch it, think about how to get the data across faster and more consistently. I think can you give some advice to those folks on the work that was done prior, before, like all the stuff I saw in the workflow that you've done with your partners before you could get to that automated state?
Yes, and I think it actually addresses and speaks to some of the fears that I hear when talking about process automation. So when I talk to a new CEO or another company, or even people in our own company about automating processes, there's certainly a concern that, well, does this mean we're going to lose jobs? Does this mean that we're going to lose the long-term employability for our people? That's absolutely not the truth, right? So Starline very much wants to reward loyalty. So one of the things that we feel very confident about is that as we're automating processes, like we are allowing our company to grow and scale up, which we've done admirably. As I mentioned, we've grown from a very small company to quite a large one. So we've never had to let people go. As we were automating, all it did was make us more effective in the marketplace. So then we were able to roll out mentorship roles where we had our people who were bringing in the new ones and training them. Now, of course, the goal is to reduce complexity. So we do want to be able to teach our newcomers that if you come into a complicated process, maybe you don't have to understand the entire process from start to finish, but maybe you can understand that, your key step within a small role is just a small decision tree where only human can really read the different factors of it and determine, like, is this in line A or line B? And the human will put it through there and make sure and use their eyes to align things to make sure it's set up for the next step. So absolutely, there is a transition that needs to happen. And that really is, like you said, 95% of the work.
Listen, I always say I'm not that smart. In order to have process automation, first you need a process, right? Like you can't automate something you haven't actually worked at the basics. And I think what you're saying in closing is really, it creates space and potentially additional investment to create other innovation in your company. And it doesn't have to be innovation on the whole process. It can be one small part that look, my daughter's 13. They call it life hacks now. Life hack is all just about automating processes they do in a small way everywhere. People coming up in our business, they know what life hack is, right? Like they know what a life hack is. So I think we just got to enable them to understand that we need to understand this process, and in order to, then we can automate this process, and you can life hack away at whatever part that you have some autonomy to do so, to create some space. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was great. Now, up next, we have Andrew, who's going to talk about connecting the construction world to Starline's internal processes. Off to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So I'm really happy to be speaking about process engineering because it's all about optimization. When you think like today, the team at Starline, led by Catherine, have identified a solution that Solidcad could deliver with a suite of products within the Autodesk platform. And what this really means is all the different teams have purpose-built tools for their task, developed with the specific features for that. And at the same time, all that data, which was just talked about in pretty good detail, right? All this data that we require, that we need to improve what we're doing and deliver for better project outcomes, comes back to a central location. Because if we don't have the information, how do we ever improve, whether it's incremental or massively, right? We can't move forward without that information. So we think about how, you saw from Tom where we're starting at that point with working with a customer. So Starline's working with a customer. They've got this design team that comes up with this great product. They go out, they manufacture this product, and they've all got their specific tools. And then we get out to site, and we've got that installations time where we've got now product on site and we've got a team out there. What happens next is typical, right? There's something that needs to be collected from that site and communicated back to the broader team. Now, traditionally, project management softwares for construction, we're really great at working with other sub-trades. They're really great with working with other stakeholders that are perhaps already within that construction space, architects, engineers, consultants. What they typically don't do and allow for that same kind of automated communication process is with the manufacturing suppliers. So in this case, Starline owns that manufacturing process, but it works the same whether it's internal or external suppliers that we're working with, right? But now what we can do when we've got some kind of change or need that needs to be communicated back, we can allow that project team to use the same tools that they always use that they need designed for their purpose and automatically communicate that right back to the manufacturing team shop floor. So Shaya, if you play that video right now, what we'll see here is you'll see the actual process, kick off from what would be the site, and it's going to automatically send this information right back to the team that's working on the manufacturing design. So if they need to make an adjustment to the software there, or maybe some, product change, they're going to have that information. And I think what was said earlier too from Catherine and Amy was we've got a single point of data entry, and we've got accountability and visibility throughout this entire process. And we're closing the loop, which really is an engineered process, right? We want to close the loop. We want to have all that information and data constantly being accessible to all the stakeholders that are required to access that information, review that information, make better decisions, as was earlier stated as well, right? That's what this solution does. I can remember working with a contractor, well, a company actually, in Atlantic Canada, sitting with the CFO and the CTO years ago. And they came to us and they said, we've been looking for years for a solution for an ERP. And they came to, I sold an ERP construction solution. And they said, we think yours might be the answer, and I thought, well, no, it's not, because it didn't exist. They've been searching for years because what they were searching for didn't exist. And I had to break it to them that my solution was no better than anything else they'd previously looked at. But today, this solution addresses that need. It addresses the manufacturing need and the construction need and brings it all together. Thanks, Tanya. Back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So we now have some time for some more questions and answers. Please put all your questions into the chat box or the Q&A box.
We must be doing a really great job of covering all the information.
I think so.
Right?
People want their lunch break back. I'm just kidding.
We'll just get a few more minutes. Don't be shy, guys. Oh, I see one. Malika, do you see that?
Yeah, we've got another question here. It says, in terms of process mapping, where is the best place to start?
Well, it's funny because we talk a lot about tribal knowledge, and when it comes to process mapping, that's something that tends to live in people's heads. So multiple perspectives for me is always where I need to start. It's not about getting that information from just one person. I need to get it from all of the people who are involved and touch that process. And of course, you need to look at your granularity. Are you collecting minuscule little steps that can be changed from person to person who is operating each process? Or are you really looking at the key milestones and factors like that? I think it's really important to define what it is that you have right now laid out within your company as far as organizational management goes, and take your process maps and apply it to that level of what really matters. What are you trying to grasp, and what are the stages that define how you can move forward? When you define what's needed to move forward, it's a lot easy to look back and say, we have extra information being collected here, or we have not enough data being collected here. And that really helps you give a clear understanding of transitioning between those and doing it efficiently.
I mean, I'll add something to the answer of that, Catherine, and that is that there are people that are expert at actually process mapping. You know, you don't have to do everything yourself. There are partners that work with Autodesk that have great experience, obviously, in process mapping. And I would always say, you don't have to eat an elephant in one bite, right? So if you can decouple some product, attach it to some product direction, take it one step at a time, work with some experts, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Yeah, process mapping is a little bit of one of those tricky things, because a lot of times they say by the time you have mapped the process, it's changed. So it's a good thing to say, well, that integration of data to be able to have that process mapping being done automatically. So if you have a requirement where, you know, at the end, the goal is to have a piece of painted material. And when you look at that material, each step is being shown along the way. And when you can look back at all of your materials and see, okay, out of all these materials, these are the steps that were taken to get here. We have common threads and we have variability. And let's look at those, let's categorize them. You really need to be able to start tagging that data, tagging that analysis, and getting into the nitty-gritty.
I would say in construction, one of the things that holds people back from process mapping correctly is that whole snowflake notion, right? It's like thinking that every single thing has to be different and custom. And unfortunately, in construction, the first thing we think about when we think about becoming a manufacturer is car production. And it's like, it's very uncommon that you would end up being such, you know, high volume, low variability like a car right now. So you have to make sure that you're thinking about becoming the type of manufacturer that actually makes sense to understand how your process mapping, your inputs and outputs, whether or not you can still customize certain things and have high variability with not such a high volume like a car business. And what pieces could you turn into high volume that could be assembled into other potentially low volume, somewhat higher variability product, right? So I think I always say like the convergence of construction to manufacturing is you don't get to fly on the first day, right? You don't go from like climbing out of like a crawling to flying, right? You kind of got to take it one step at a time, and anchoring that around some sort of product that has repeatability, whatever that is going to help a little bit with your process mapping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your answers and for your questions. Is there any more questions in the chat, Malika?
That's all for this one.
Perfect. Okay, so now for the last part of our roundtable, it begins where Amy and Catherine's going to be discussing business systems, integrations, and how it accesses the latest information. Amy and Catherine, off to you.
I mean, I'll start with this. Listen, we just talked about convergence. We talked about a lot of different tools. We're talking about Forge. Not every company is just like Starline. Lots of people are making lots of different things, different assemblies. And even though you're making different things, a lot of the same challenges are there. A lot of the same potential solutions are there. And what Forge, I think, is really allowing people is you don't have to have a one size fits all, but you can actually have a development process and a partnership that you can approach these things in the same manner. Because especially when you're talking about business and systems integration, you want people to work within the tools that they're comfortable in, right, Catherine? Like I always say, you're not going to get a duck to be a dog in a day, right? But the other thing is, so we want to be able to allow them to use the tools they know how to use comfortably, unless it doesn't work anymore. And then we have to have some sort of change management. But currently, more about what we're doing is how to get the right system for the right people using their tools across multiple disciplines, right? So how you're sharing that information so that they can use their tools to compute something or see something or decide something. How do you go about that at Starline?
That's, another really tricky question, right? Because of course we're talking then about there are different things that different people need to see. There's different level of detail required to communicate with different people in the field. Now, if I want to talk to somebody who wants a low level of detail so that they can understand something and give me some feedback on it, when I send them that, whether it's a model or a PDF, then I want to make sure that I'm not overwhelming them and overcomplicating their process, right? But when that comes back to me, I also want to make sure that I haven't lost all of that information and data that I worked so hard to put in there in the first place. So it is really about being able to have something that is the transfer of information and then bring it back to somewhere where you can keep building on that in that iterations of processes. So we are using Revit and Inventor in a way that allows us to have a simplified model of our product and a much more complicated model. We can have their parameters so that they're set up in the same format, and we can use it to either export from one source and import it into the other, or we can just use it to output it to a database so that it can be drawn into other platforms as well. So we have a lot of capabilities in there with our amazing IT department, of course.
You know, it's I always say, don't make people look for a book in a library, right? Like just give them the book. And I think listen, we come from a business and construction where they go, just CYA, hand them like 400 sheets of drawings, make them look for the information that they need to make that decision on. Why do we do that? Right. And usually, by the way, that was intent anyway. It doesn't even have the answer we were looking for. It just has some intent of what somebody drew for the answer. I just think I love the fact that you're doing this connection with Inventor and Revit, because you can give them, I think the way I always talk about it is like this, you know, as long as you set the parameters, the rules and constraints with an Inventor, they don't necessarily need to know every detail of your model, as long as they can make decisions on how that model will interact with other things without having to download every detail of like the fastener, I call it the fastener level detail, that they might not care about, right? It's like, what level of abstraction, that's the phrase I like to use, what level of abstraction do they need to see, right? Whether it's in your, if you define that by LOD or whatever in the lenses that you're thinking about, what level of abstraction is really necessary for them to make the decision they need to make within the tool they want to use that data for, right? And I think as part of your process mapping, understanding the stakeholder needs of who will interact with that data and what tool they're using, you know, how important is that? Because you want them to be able to do something with that, right? You just don't want them to get it for the sake of getting it, right?
That's right. And really, I mean, that brings us to the next point, being that working with this information and working across different disciplines, it's the same whether it's internal or external. It's about taking that key piece of information out of a very complicated review process and highlighting it to the person who needs to know. So taking that information and putting it in a dashboard or in a report or bringing it into another application for it to run task management. I mean, there's so many things you can do with data when it's in a centralized platform. And having the tools like the Forge and the Autodesk platform, that is something that is well documented, easy to interact with, and standardized, has made our job a lot easier.
Right. So give me an example. How do you create a complete bill of materials when you're working with both architects that use Revit as their native tool and manufacturing with Inventor as their native tool?
Yeah, and you know, it even goes beyond that, because there's bill of materials, there's always something more to add to it. Right. You think you've got it, and then you go to ship it and realize, oh, I need some rope to tie this down with. Nobody was modeling rope to tie to the truck in their design plan. So there's always something more to add to it. So it has to be something that you're able to have a bill of materials that is coming from different phases of the project and it's rolling up. And it's something that, as you were being shown earlier when Tom was talking, it was showing that you can do historical comparison of bill of materials in PLM so that you can see what was originally planned, what the changes were, what's been added, and then even from there, you can still add more. There's always more to add.
Right. You know, it's funny. You made me think of something from back in, I'm old, I always say, back in the day, we had a manufacturer we were working with. Not only did they model the product, they actually modeled the trucks they shipped the products on and all of the materials that went along. Because remember, it's not just data for manufacturing. It's called data for manufacturing assembly in the plant and in where its final assembly place is going to be. So that includes transportation, shipping, logistics, and bringing any materials back from there that you want to reuse for the next shipment. So I think we have to start thinking about the entirety of our process, because if you make a great product and you can't actually get it out to the site and assemble it in an accelerated fashion, right? That's what really holds us back. And by the way, costs on site are much more than in the factory, as you know, right? I'd rather figure it out. I think my claim to fame was we used to ship a lot of buildings to other countries. And I used to say, there's no Home Depot there. What are we going to do? There's no place to go buy that rope you forgot. So we better think about what rope is going to be needed before we actually ship that over to Africa or ship that to the middle of the Pacific Islands, because there's no Home Depot there. There's nothing there, right? When you're building some of these buildings. So I think we have to really think about that data and enable that data. I like to think of your product, like whenever we think about a product, a physicality of a product and its digitized workflow, your little product has like a little data backpack on it, like a data packet, like Dora the Explorer for those moms and dads out there. And in that data backpack, magical things can be pulled in and out at any time across Forge to be utilized by whoever wants to use their native tool to understand something about that product. They don't all take all the things out all at once. If I'm the sustainability expert, I might not care about the bill of materials in the way in which somebody who's buying it does. But that little data packet, that information, that data backpack has to be loosely coupled with your product so people can actually functionally understand things that are important to them, right? So that's just my take on it. I think I'll pass it. Unless you want to add something to that, Catherine, we can pass it back to Tanya.
Well, absolutely. I think you've hit it on the mark. And the only thing I would add is that it really is important to have that place where you can collect your data. So of course, we kind of feel like we collect all the things. We collect hockey, we collect basketball, we collect baseball. I mean, we're big collectors of data. Starline's been doing this for a long time. But it's if you're collecting data in different applications, which used to be the case where things were disconnected, it does cause a point where you end up with duplicated data sets, where you end up with diverging information and things like that. So again, the trend of these platforms being standardized, well documented, something where you can match parameters and properties and data fields so that you can push and pull and connect. And it's not a human who has to physically type it in from point A to point B. It's made a big difference in the industry today.
I gotta say, hit by the bus. You used to say, like, what if that guy gets hit by a bus? What are we gonna do? He's got all that stuff on his laptop, or not even then, he is on his desktop. It's like when you should think in you are at jeopardy today at your company if the data you have either lies within a human being or in technology siloed in some expert's desktop software that you cannot access across the cloud if you're not that expert. You are in jeopardy. Your business is in jeopardy. And if that is the case, you should reach out to some of the experts you're hearing talk and get their opinion, because you will not survive, and be resilient for anything that's coming up in this current, future right now. Not even far future, like the today, let alone the tomorrow.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
Thanks, Amy and Catherine. That was amazing. Now I'd like to introduce Shaya, our project manager, where he'll be speaking about the digital thread from the architectural model to the manufacturing data. Shaya?
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Tanya. It's finally my turn. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Shaya Ganmer, and I'm very excited to be here and presenting alongside Amy and Catherine. First of all, I would like to thank Amy and Catherine for sharing the challenges they have witnessed in the industry and how they have come up with innovative methods to resolve these challenges. We decided to talk about business system integration as the last part of our webinar to emphasize the importance of data connectivity within business systems. It's evident that multiple software are required to accommodate the needs of an organization. It's challenging to have the same information available across all software applications. Additionally, external processes need to be integrated and connected to internal processes. The digital thread will only continue its journey if business systems are integrated with each other. So data is not trapped in one place. In the next few minutes, I would like to show you how Solidcad and Starline have integrated different Autodesk software and other business systems. What you're about to see has enabled Starline to extract architectural Revit model information into Inventor, where Inventor generates manufacturing 3D models and assemblies. 3D model data, supply chain information, cost are then reviewed and approved in a complete bill of materials in PLM. The integration from PLM to Autodesk Construction Cloud, ACC, allows field personnel to always access the latest information, while internal personnel can track the project status in PLM. What you're about to see is when a project is at the stage where it requires Revit model creation. As you see in the video, Starline designers, architects, and contractors work on a common Revit model. What's special in this case is that Solidcad has worked with Starline to create standardized model properties and families in Revit. As shown in the video, each family contains model information such as height, depth, gap, and so on. Once a Revit model creation is done, Starline has the ability to quickly create a sheet with tables that contain model family data. So these tables are then automatically gathered and converted to a database that can be accessed by Autodesk Inventor. The automation inventor reads the Revit data and generates manufacturing 3D models. At this point, Starline is able to add detailed fabrication information to their models. So these details are things such as drill holes, bolts, nuts, glue, or in some cases, there's specific cutouts that have to be designed inside of the model for fabrication purposes. The next step in the process is PLM. PLM acts as a single source of truth where the precious data containing architectural and fabrication information are presented in the form of a bill of materials. As you see, the bill of materials, and as Catherine and Amy were talking about, contain additional information such as vendors, supplier, cost, and all the other information that came from the Revit and Inventor model. By having the bill of materials in one centralized location, Starline team members can access the right data at the right time. Additionally, for those team members who don't have CAD application and need to have access to 3D models and drawings, they can view and have access to the latest CAD or model data throughout PLM. We just saw how an architectural model is automatically generated in Inventor for fabrication purposes. We also saw in the video how 3D models, drawings, and bill of materials are available to team members at Starline. Well, the story behind Digital Thread's journey doesn't end here. The bill of materials that you saw in PLM needs to be available to other business systems such as ERP, MRP, for costing, ordering, or even for reporting. In this video, you will see how information in PLM are integrated to Starline's Microsoft Power BI for data analysis. Starline has a data analysis practice where they do a deep dive into their data to define cost trends and complication factors. Starline has unique reporting needs. Therefore, they have data analysts who create custom reports to summarize the analysis. In the past, Starline had given their analysts access to query their databases, but the analysts don't always understand how the fields and tables are laid out and correlate with each other. PLM has helped Starline to define the data fields, and the integration between PLM and Power BI has also given the analysts the ability to filter and visualize the data in different ways. This has really given Starline the best of both worlds in order to provide a meaningful bridge from the complexity of their IT world to managers report on which, they're making some key business decisions. What you saw were a couple of quick videos to showcase how business system integration have contributed to Starline's success. We're happy to answer your questions now, and I would like to thank everyone. Malika and Tanya, it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaya. So we have some more time for some question and answers. Please put them in the Q&A box. We'll just give this a few minutes. No questions, anyone?
Just maybe one thing I can add while people are maybe thinking about the questions is that everything you saw today is what we call live sort of business system integration, because in the past you would wait over time at nighttime to connect systems and so on, but now today we want things to be fast, we want things to be accurate, and as things are changing minute by minute, a live integration, as you saw, allow organizations like Starline to basically see that change, that movement of data live from one system to another system. So at any given time when you're looking at, let's say, ACC or PLM, what you see is the truth, is the data that was updated maybe a second ago.
Perfect, thanks, Shaya. So doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment. Maybe we can go to our next slide. Perfect. Okay, so now it's time for a short break and introducing our very first commercial for Fusion 360 Manage here at Solidcad.
When we speak to companies about product lifecycle management, or PLM, we often hear things like, "We tried to get organized, but PLM is just too complex." At Solidcad, we help streamline the process and allow you to eliminate tedious data reentry so your PLM software smoothly integrates with your enterprise resource planning system. If you're looking to improve your product offerings, refine supply chains, and organize your business, PLM is one of the best tools to get you there. Expected results for companies using PLM software include lower product costs, greater product quality, faster time to market, increased productivity, accurate data sharing, and much more. Get in touch today at www.solidcad.ca, helping customers, connecting processes with product lifecycle management.
Perfect. Love that video. Okay, so what's next for Starline? So after uncovering the challenges Starline faced and the solutions that help improve their bottlenecks, what's next? Next up, we're going to have Catherine for a brief overview on the next steps to get Starline one step closer to success. Catherine?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. There's always going to be more to do, and these next steps are things that we've alluded to already. So it was interesting, Amy, when you mentioned that you had a company who's actually modeling the trucks. Well, I mean, find that so important. We are adding more and more data points to our equipment, to our machinery. We're adding checkpoints for humans to submit quality assurance reports, photos, videos. All of this equals to a whole lot of data being pulled in somewhere. So we're very glad that PLM has given us a central platform to bring this data into, but you still have a whole lot of needles to look at. So what we're looking at is an approach that we had already considered right from the first day we started engineering. We always wanted to think design to manufacturing engineering. We always wanted to think about iterative designs, about variability that was known and something that we could manufacture and something that was within our product requirements. But now we're talking about this at a much wider scale. So we need to be able to pull in all of this information. We need to be able to categorize it. We need to be able to sort it, and we need to be able to have those things that need to be looked at for further analysis very quickly. So we're looking at using some AI solutions to do auto tagging for all of this data that's being pulled in. Right now, we've already done this with the help of Solidcad. As you mentioned, we have some of those common parameters and properties in our modeling families that are being passed along. So that means that when we have something that is put from system to system, it's already being categorized for us. Now, there's a whole lot more that needs to be happening when it comes to using things like pictures and video documentation. So quality assurance is something that is so important as far as bringing this product from your clean manufacturing environment, where most things can be controlled within a shop. When you do bring it onto site, there's a lot less that you control. There's a lot more things that can happen that are out of your realm of control, but there's just a lot of things that can happen on site. So when we're bringing things out there into the great unknown, we want to be able to take things in an efficient way. So I have people on site who are taking videos and narrating into them. So we need to be able to extract the words that they're saying, because I can't afford to have somebody take a video of a piece of material that has an issue with it, and then go back to their computer, upload the video, and start typing out all of the keywords that I need to know about inside that video. They've already done the work. And we have the technology today to be able to extract all of that information right out of that video. We can use AI to recognize objects. We can recognize key terms. We can do data mapping in a way that brings everything from site back into our realm of control and our realm of visibility. So we're really looking forward to digital twin simulations at Starline in the future.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Okay, we're at our last Q&A. Anyone have any questions for Catherine on what's next for Starline?
Or any other questions that, throughout the presentation, if you have, of anything, we're all here to answer your questions. So we're happy to help you. I guess one of the questions that I usually ask the audience, and this is virtual, we can't see your face unfortunately, but it's how do you do things, right? So we talked about Starline, and Amy talked about the industry, but how do you do things, right? Does that resonate to you? So this would be a great opportunity to ask those questions.
Hey, Shaya, I think it'd be also interesting to know if you're in the chat right now, and you're an architect, throw up a little A so we know who you are. If you're architects, if you're contractors, manufacturers, stick up a little A, a C, an M, throw or who you are if you don't want to just put the initial in. It'd be great to hear the types of people that are coming to hear this information, what kind of company you are. I'm sure they have that already in the, when you signed up and things like that, but I'd love to know if you have any specific challenges, being either an architect in this ecosystem or a manufacturer or a general contractor or a subcontractor.
That's great, Amy. Thank you. Yeah, if you don't mind doing that, that would be great.
North Americans are very shy. Here we go. Thanks, Greg Fitzpatrick. Manufacturer. We got one. 1 out of 52. 51 people have to start chiming in. See, if we were in person, I could pick on Greg and say, what do you make? What are some of these challenges? Talk to us. Here we go.
We do have a question here from Jacob. It says, what is your suggestion for step 1 for a company who's doing everything manually with all data being managed on individuals' computers, emails, etc.?
Step 1 is one of the, it can be the hardest or it can be the easiest, depending on how you want to approach it. So changing hearts and minds, of course, is going to be a part of that step 1. So always a really difficult one. That said, you can also go the other way, where you can look at something very small and you can keep your scope narrow. You can look at a very small piece of the puzzle, you can document it, you can start to digitalize it, and you can show progress on a small piece. When you're able to show the value that offers to your company, then the rest of the adoption is going to go a heck of a lot smoother.
I'll throw my answer into that a little bit. I would say, everybody needs to know what they want to be when they grow up, right? So you have to make sure before you actually get into like the weeds of things, really meet with some professionals. And by the way, you can meet with Autodesk partners, you can meet with Autodesk, you can meet with people that you know in the space that do this kind of consulting, you can have business peer groups. You really want to understand what you want to be when you grow up and what's the business architecture? Where's the value at your business that you're trying to capture and understand when you think about what your business does? You have to have a plan to lay out that business architecture so that you understand the flow of the business and what's important and where you make your money and where you lose your money. And then once you understand what your business wants to be when it grows up, what that architecture looks like, where you are now versus where you want to be, you can start understanding, systems architecture, like systems thinking about how you want to look at certain areas of your business, what information is critical and what information you want to capture. What are the inputs and outputs of all of those processes in the process development that are so important for you to know, right? So technology for technology's sake never helps anybody. It's technology to actually grow your business and make your business more resilient and more efficient that helps your business. So I think you got to start there. I'll tell you something funny. I bought a business years and years ago, true story in the space. And I was just telling this the other day, and we actually sat down next to all these managers. And there was a part of the business, the woman ran, she had a PhD, not lying. And I think I was in my early 30s, right? And she had a PhD. She was running this very complex business. And she had all these spreadsheets all the time and spent tons of time filling out all these spreadsheets, having people integrate these spreadsheets. And I worked there, we bought the company, and a week later she quit without notice and said, I'm leaving today. And I thought, what am I going to do? And literally I took all those spreadsheets, I put them all on a giant conference table. That's how many there were. I brought in all the guys and gals from the factory, all the ones from procurement and accounting and leadership. And I said, okay, so we just bought this business. The woman that ran it just quit. What do you guys actually use and look at to do your jobs? True story. Then I thought, wow, I'm like a little worried about this. Everybody pointed of the probably 30 spreadsheets on the table. Everybody pointed to only one. They said, I use this like it's my Bible. I have to give the information for all these other ones. I spend countless hours, this is true story, filling out these other ones for her, but I really only look at this one. And I said, okay, guess what? Stop filling out the other ones. Everybody just stop. Stop giving anyone any data on them. We're only going to populate this one spreadsheet for now. And if you get in trouble and somebody says you're going to get fired because I didn't have this information, send them to me and I will cover you. Like, you will not lose your job. Just stop filling them out. And I'm not kidding. Nobody ever asked ever again about any of the data on any of those other spreadsheets that we literally chucked in the trash. So, like, understanding what's important to run your business, what people use as levers to understand what their jobs are, defining those roles, defining the processes, giving them the right tools and the right training. Those are the things that are management's responsibility. So I would say, really just take stock of what your business is today, what it wants to be when it grows up, and understanding a big plan. so that you can start drilling down into the weeds of what's on some of these people's computers that you need. And some of it you can probably just chuck in the trash like we did that day. So that's my only advice from being an old salty, I would say, business person in this side of things.
We've got one more question here as well. It says, what is the biggest hurdle for implementing PLM?
Take that one. I'll take that one. So I think for the biggest hurdle was just, again, the idea of, okay, here's another new software. There's another place for us to enter data and that sort of thing. So the first thought of something new is really the scariest part. When we started to see that, the amount of human input that it took could be very nominal, very minimal, or it could be maximum. It really gives the control to the driver's seat. And that's what we're looking for, is to be able to give people who are making those decisions control, being able to allow them to, define what's needed for their departments or for their processes or for their job. So like Amy said, if you are just collecting information because you've always collected it, then it's going to seem really overwhelming. So PLM was a point where we were able to say, let's only put in there what we really need, what we really are operating on. But definitely the idea of something new was the hardest. I'd say another thing that I love and can be a challenge about PLM is everything has its own space. So we talk about all of this data being collected, bringing it into a central repository, but everything has a place to live in PLM. So a lot of us parents at home will tell our kids, everything has its home. Make sure it goes there when you're cleaning up so you can find it next time. PLM offers us that, which can then create this very wide ecosystem. So for us having the benefit of Solidcad to be able to bring information from that PLM workspace and populate it across multiple workspaces, make sure that it is automated, that it is easy, and that it is simple for the user was so helpful and really helped us get over that hurdle. I think without Solidcad, what we would be looking at PLM today would be very different. The other thing that I also really valued for it was that even though Solidcad did some things for me that were very complicated as far as process automation and scripting went, I let them know what I needed and they set it up and configured PLM for me to accomplish it. Now, when I want to go and troubleshoot the issue, I don't have to go back to them. Everything is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So if I want to click on a step and look at the script that is driving the next piece of process automation, all I have to do is click on where the human user goes to trigger it. And I can find that script name. I can go to the back end. I can see what that script is doing down to every detail. So for us, there was a fear of loss of control if we allowed a third party to come in and do that automation scripting. But PLM has provided a platform that makes it very visible and easy to navigate.
We've got maybe one last question in the chat here from Carrie. It says, where did you start this process and how did you start it?
This process started, just from really looking at what are we using now? Where are those bottlenecks? What are our greatest challenges? So of course we did have, we're a successful company. And we always said, if we do nothing, we're going to continue to do what we do. Might be hard, but we're going to pull it off because we work with great people and that's just what they do. Of course, we always wanted to be able to grow and scale up because that is what keeps us competitive. That is what allows us to reach that next level. So for us to think about starting, it was really about thinking, where are we now? And we answered Amy's question of what do we want to grow into?
Thanks, Catherine. Any more questions, Malika?
That's all. We did it.
Woo!
Fantastic.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank everyone who has attended this event today. Thank you, Amy, Catherine, marketing. It wouldn't have been possible without any of you, so thank you. We'll be reaching out to all attendees. We'd love to understand your challenges and goals to see how Solidcad can help you.